That skirt is too short. Susan jumped in her seat. Mr. Dan seemed to tower over her at the front desk. He looked paler than usual, but clean-shaven. "I'm sorry?" she replied. She was caught off guard by both his sudden appearance and words. She slyly clicked her email closed. Mr. Dans ignored the screen and continued to look at her. "That skirt is too short. This is a public library. We have a dress code." Susan felt so small next to him now. She wanted to run away. "I'm sorry. I won't wear it again." As soon as she stopped speaking, Mr. Dans turned and went back to his office. "Those pants are too tight." Susan jumped. She was being more alert lately since the first episode with the manager. She made an effort to not be online at the front desk. She didn't wear anything above the knee, but that didn't stop the pervs from checking her out. Mr. Dan stood over her. "We have a dress code." "I'm sorry," Susan said. "Don't be sorry. Be aware." With that, Mr. Dans left. Susan saw him come toward her this time. She braced herself. She looked down at herself and determined she was well within the dress code limits. "That baggy jacket is too baggy." Susan brusquely took it off, glaring at Mr. Dans. When he was out of earshot, she realized he was wearing blue jeans. On a Tuesday. Fridays were jeans day. Susan was at the computer at the front desk, alone. She felt fine. The manager's door shut. Susan looked over. Mr. Dans was walking towards her. "Oh God," she thought. "Please, no." "Susan," he said. He seemed to be in a good mood. Susan waited for him to continue, but he didn't. He just kept looking at her. Mr. Dans grabbed her by the throat with both hands and squeezed until her neck crackled in his vice grip. Her body fell out of the chair. Mr. Dans stood over her. An old man with a book under his arm walked up to the desk. He looked at Mr. Dans and then down at the dead Susan. Mr. Dans smiled at him. "She looks great." Yellow cake with chocolate frosting. It was Eddie's favorite, and since it was his birthday, he got what he wanted. The kids were grouped together, running around and screaming. Their moms gossiped at one side of the backyard, while the few fathers in attendance drank beers at the other. The three groups united when Eddie's mom brought his cake out. The kids were already high on fruit punch and pizza, but the call of sugar was too strong for their weak wills. "Blow out the candles," Eddie's mom said. "Can we open presents after this?" the boy asked. "Absolutely." Eddie stretched up on his tiptoes and got all 7 candles in one clean gust. Everyone applauded his effort, causing the birthday boy to blush. This was his day, and he was going to enjoy every second. The cake was sliced and distributed to the kids first, then the fathers. A few of the moms passed on a piece, vigilant with their diets in front of the other women. "This is so good," one of the moms told her husband, who was the last of the men to get a piece. The man grunted and licked the frosting off his plastic fork. His eyes widened. "This is good," he said, changing his tune. He shaved some more frosting off and licked the fork clean. And he kept licking. Ran the sharp side of the fork down the tip of his tongue. He then devoured his cake in 3 rapid chomps. "You don't have to be mean," his wife told him. "Mean?" he said. "Mean? Mean?" He repeated that word, mean, several times. "What's wrong?" his wife asked. "You okay?" "I feel great," he said, eyeing her plump frame up and down. "I feel like I can do anything." "Oh, that's the sugar talking." He snatched her plate from her hands. "Hey!" Her cake was gone in 2 bites. "I can do anything," he said as he slapped her ass. The children ran among themselves in a wide circle, chocolate frosting smeared over their mouths and cheeks. While they hooted nonsense before, they chanted sounds in an orderly fashion. But this went unnoticed by the adults who were still eating and chatting. The man rushed over to the kids and started kicking each one, breaking their little circle. Some fell, some cried. Some started to chase him with their forks. The chants dried up, leaving only the pounding of footfalls to mark time. The man's wife screamed his name. The man stopped and considered her with a blank stare. After a moment, he stalked over to her and punched her in the side of the head. The other women looked on in shock until one of their own began to lick her plate clean. Once that was done, she crumpled up the paper plate and shoved it in her mouth. Using her fork to cram the whole thing in, she began to choke. The other moms tried to hold her still. One of them reached inside her mouth. The woman gnashed down on her hand, not letting go even as blood gushed from the bite. "I can do anything." Eddie dropped his pants by the food table. There was still leftover pizza, lukewarm in the day's heat. He took a slice with his dirty hands and rolled it up. "Pizza, pizza," he said as he pressed the pizza between his butt cheeks. "Pizza, pizza." The moms who still held their shit together made for the back door, hoping to flee through the house. The yard was fenced in, but there were too many fork-yielding maniacs between them and the chain-link gate. They bottlenecked at the back door, nudging each other for clearance, shouting obscenities, making no progress. The maniacs, their husbands and children, caught them. 7 women who couldn't be calm and civil enough to file through one at a time. The men ended them, choking them and snapping their necks while the remaining children turned on themselves, slashing one another with the forks. Tines broke off in their eyeballs. Screams and panting filled the air. Eddie's mom chased her son around the yard, trying to extract the pizza from his rear. Eddie tracked blood everywhere he ran. And littering the ground were the discarded paper plates with smudges of brown frosting and bits of Eddie's favorite cake.